Welcome back. In this video, we'll talk about some of the drawbacks to the plurality voting system. Here's an example of an election in the plurality voting system where 15 voters have voted for A, 10 voted for B, and 17 voted for C. So as you can see, there are 42 voters total. And using the plurality voting system, we would have an extended ranking of C in first place, A in second, and B in third. So what are the drawbacks? It seems pretty clear-cut here that C was preferred over the other candidates by the voters. Well, notice that C is not a majority winner here. It only won the plurality. It could be that candidates A and B have very similar ideologies and that C's is very different. So here, more people prefer A and B's ideology combined than prefer the ideology of C. Should C have really won in this case? It could also be that if the voters knew that B was going to do poorly, they would have decided to vote for A instead. And finally, it could be that most voters prefer, let's say, candidate A over candidate C. And maybe they also prefer candidate A over candidate B. This could be the case, for example, if candidate A is the more moderate candidate and candidates B and C represent opposite extremes. So in any of these cases, we're sort of talking about voters' second and third choices among the candidates. And so voting systems that seek to remedy some of the issues I mentioned take into account voters' second and third choices. So suppose that instead of all of the voters just recording their first choice, voters rank the candidates from 1 to 3. So behind the scenes, let's assume that among the 15 people who voted for candidate A, their second and third choices broke down like this. So what I'm showing you here is that 14 of the people who voted for candidate A as their first choice had B as their second choice and C as their third choice, and one of those 15 had C as their second choice and B as their third choice. Similarly, we could wonder about the second and third choices of the people who voted for candidate B. So let's say that 8 of the people who voted for candidate B preferred A as their second choice and C as their third choice, and 2 of the people who voted for candidate B as their first choice had C as their second choice and A as their third choice. Finally, let's assume that everyone who had C as their first choice had B as their second choice and A as their third choice. So this chart that I've drawn down below is what we call a preference schedule, and it records not only all of the voters' first choices, but also their second and third choices. The way we read this is that 14 people rank the candidates A first, B second, C third. 1 voter ranked the candidates A first, C second, B third, etc. You'll notice that there were still 42 votes in total. So now let's do a deeper analysis of what actually happened in this election and what the voters' preferences really are. Looking at the 2 columns highlighted in green, we can see that 22 of the voters actually had C as their last choice. Even though C had a plurality of first choice votes, it actually had a majority of last place votes. Another way that we might look at this is to look at the columns highlighted in blue. These are columns where B is ranked above C. And we can see that 24, a majority of voters, ranked B above C. Similarly, looking at the columns highlighted in red, we can see that a majority of voters ranked A above C as well. So all of this is to say that even though C won the plurality, candidate C might not be the best representation of what the voters actually want. The other voting systems that we'll look at in this class take into account voters' second choice, third choice, and maybe beyond, and somehow use that set of voter preferences to determine the winner. As I mentioned before, this set of voter preferences, which I summarize in this chart, is called a preference schedule for the election. We'll see more examples of preference schedules in the next video, and we'll learn about the new voting systems later on in this chapter.